Before I started this channel, there was one part that I couldn't stop thinking about. Not whether I'd succeed, or whether I would survive being bad at it. I imagined that period so many times, uploading a video I wasn't really proud of, watching it get almost no views, hearing my own voice back and wondering why I'd ever thought this was a good idea. I had a whole movie playing in my head about what those kind of first few months is going to look like. And honestly, that movie was one of the biggest reasons I waited so long to start. Then I finally uploaded my first video and something strange happened. The bad period was real. It just wasn't the bad period that I spent all the time preparing for. I'd been playing the emotional costs of a future that didn't actually exist. Before I ever pressed upload, I thought I knew exactly what the hardest part was going to be. I imagined in a very specific kind of discomfort. Not falling quietly, but falling publicly. I pictured people clicking on one of my videos and immediately seeing how inexperienced I was. The awkward delivery, the pacing that wasn't quite right, the editing that didn't match what I'd imagined in my head. I thought I'd feel exposed, and like everyone watching would notice the gap between the creator I wanted to be and the one that I actually was. The strange thing is how detailed that picture became, because I had never even uploaded a video, but somehow I convinced myself I already knew exactly how embarrassing it was going to feel. And because that picture felt so real, I treated it like evidence. Evidence that waiting a little longer made sense. That one more month of preparation would somehow make the bad period smaller. Looking back, I wasn't avoiding the real beginning. I was avoiding a version of the beginning that only existed in my imagination. And when I finally started, I realized I had spent far more energy fearing the bad period than the bad period ever asked me to spend living through it. So I uploaded the first video, and then I waited, not for views, for the feeling that I spent months preparing myself for, but the embarrassment, the exposure. That moment where I'd finally experienced everything I imagined about being visibly bad at something. It never arrived, not because the video was good, because it wasn't. Even while I was editing it, I could see the awkward pauses, the pacing that quite wasn't right, and the moments where the version on screen fell well short of the one that I imagined in my head. None of that surprised me. What surprised me was the feeling, or rather, the lack of the feeling that I've been expecting. I imagined those imperfections landing with enormous emotional weight. Instead, they just existed. They weren't comfortable, but they weren't devastating either. And after a while, I realized why. For months, I had been imagining my work being judged by an audience that only existed in my head. Thousands of people noticing every weakness, every awkward sentence, every mistake. Reality looked nothing like that. The audience was tiny, a handful of people, most of whom had no reason to analyze the video as harshly as I did. The gap between the imagined bad period and the real one wasn't that reality was easy, but was that reality was ordinary. The discomfort I had rehearsing for months had been built from imagination. The discomfort I actually experienced was something much smaller, something I could live through, and once I had lived through it once, it stopped being something I needed to fear so much. Once I noticed the gap between the version I imagined and the version I actually lived through, I couldn't stop thinking about how that gap had become so large. I think it's because our imagination is a terrible predictor of beginnings. When we picture ourselves being bad at something, we almost never imagine the real first day. We imagine the worst possible version of it, the biggest audience, the most painful mistake, the most humiliating reaction, a version where every weakness is obvious and everyone notices. And because we rehearse that version over and over, it starts feeling less like imagination and more like memory, like something we've already experienced. So by the time the real beginning arrives, we are not reacting to reality anymore. We are reacting to a story that we've been telling ourselves for months. But stories like that leave something important out. They skip the actual conditions you start under. When you're new, almost no one is actually watching. Almost no one is judging. Almost nobody is expecting anything from you. The audience you're afraid of doesn't exist yet. The people whose opinions carry so much weight in your imagination haven't even found you. Which means the emotional cost you've been preparing yourself for isn't based on the beginning you actually experience, but based on a version of the future where you've already become visible. And that's the strange part. We borrow the emotions from a future we haven't reached yet, then use those borrowed emotions as a reason not to begin in the present. Looking back, I wasn't afraid of my first video. I was afraid of my imaginary audience watching my 100th. And I spent months paying the emotional price for something that was never going to happen on day one. So here's what I found once I stopped borrowing from the future and started living in the actual present. The bad period wasn't just less painful than I imagined, but was more useful. Because the feedback, even tiny amounts of it, even from a handful of people, watching something I wasn't proud of, was a completely different category of information from anything that I collected while preparing. Real people watching a real thing that I actually made told me things that months of research and planning and watching other people's videos had never managed to. What landed, what didn't, where the attention drifted, what I'll do differently next time. None of that was available while I was waiting. All of it became available the moment I started. I've been trying to prepare for a course that I could only take by enrolling. And every month I spent preparing, instead, every month I spent paying the emotional cost of the future that I imagined. That was a month I didn't get any of the actual benefits. The discomfort I rehearsed for months cost me something real. The discomfort I actually experienced taught me something real. Those are not the same trade. If you're dreading the bad period of something you haven't started yet, notice the version of it you've been imagining. How large is the audience in that picture? How harsh is the judgment? How vivid is the discomfort? Then ask yourself, is that the beginning you actually have? Or is it the future you borrowed from? Because almost certainly, what you've been imagining is bigger than what you actually face. You're not going to start in front of thousands. You're going to start in front of almost nobody. And almost nobody seeing something imperfect is ordinary. Not painless, but ordinary. Survivable in the way the imagined version never quite feels like it will be. The bad period is real. The dread of it is almost always worse. And the gap between how bad you imagine it will feel and how bad it actually feels. That gap exists for almost everyone who starts something. You only find out it exists by starting. Because until you do, the imagined version is the only version you have. And the imagined version, vivid, detailed, populated with an audience that doesn't exist yet, will always feel like enough of a reason to wait. That's the next one.